And you're like, what happened? I was normal. I was doing my thing. I was being how I am. I have not changed. And out of nowhere, it's like cold water just got dumped on you of the public opinion. And you're like, where did this come from? And it's because the initiations are always happening and we can't control those initiations amongst other people.
Hello. Welcome to the podcast Biz on the Brain with your host, me, Annemarie, where we talk about anything and everything around being your most authentic self. What does that look like? How do you get there? And just figuring it out along the way together. And I love having guests on this podcast because I personally reflect the best when I can externalize my thoughts and hear them back and then see people's reaction and then, just share lived experiences. I think that's the most valuable thing that can teach you about yourself when you see something reflected back to you, or you see how you embody space and affect people as you just, live being full you. And I dedicated a special season to just manifestors of the human design. And if you don't know what human design is or what a manifestor is, I recommend you check out the first episode of the season where I explain it in detail, because I'm a manifestor and my guest is a manifestor. And we are talking specifically how that affected us with the trauma and also then, raising like a phoenix and helping people with knowing what it feels like to just not be yourself at all, and being people-pleasing and just really against your values and soul and self-expression that comes uniquely and automatically to you as opposed to everybody else, right? Everybody is so distinctly different. Why do we put people into boxes? I will never know. I don't understand. So I'm here to kick the boxes, make it a craft project, and everybody can live in their own little cat box house, whatever you want to do with the box, or like kick it to the curb, And so in this episode, I'm talking to Taylor Proctor, who is a business coach, helping women really step into that aligned self. What does that look like? How does that feel? And I personally do this with visual and branding, where I try to take people's essence, because I see stuff in front of my eyeballs of how they feel, what their vibe is, how they can look in a brand video and in a photo, but also in the bigger picture, where every time they show up online, they are them. And you know exactly what you're going to get. When you meet them, you're like, you're the realist, you're the youest. I already feel like I know you. And that is also the most natural and fulfilling thing to be, when people actually applaud you for the way you are, because you showed up as that and not because you showed up in the way that is the most pushed by the algorithm, when you keep performing and performing because that's the most successful so far, which I've been at that point where I was suddenly performing as myself, but just one specific part of myself, because that seemed to be most accepted. And so I would just show up and tone down all of the other parts of me. And that just made me feel resentful. Don't want that for anybody. So in this episode, we're talking about how to not feel that. And without further ado, I'm introducing you to the wonderful Taylor. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We met last week, real brief. I feel like that's a theme. And then we instantly clicked, and here we are. And you're a fellow manifestor like me. But you're a very special snowflake manifestor because you are ego. And you said that's 1% of the population, because just manifestors are like 80 to 90%, because we're already special snowflakes. And then most of them are also not ego. Like that's a very specific thing. And I always thought being splenic is already annoying because it's this tiny voice that speaks once and then shuts up, and you're like left to fend with whatever's happening by yourself. But egos have a different flavor, so I'd be interested to hear your perspective. But first things first, who are you in your own words?
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I'm Taylor Proctor. I am a 5/1 ego manifestor, and I'm about 3 years into my human design experiment, if you will. And over those 3 years, a lot of deconditioning and also a lot of understanding who I am, how I function in the world, and how to get things done. And I can relate with the hearing it once and then you're kind of left to fend for yourself, because as an ego manifestor, there's not a whole lot of information out there for us. And actually, it is my understanding, I'm not a human design expert, but it is my understanding that only 2 types can be ego types, which is ego manifestors, which is ego manifested, and ego projected, which is ego projectors. So it's my understanding that the projectors and the manifestors are the only types of people who even have the option for an ego authority. And we equate to less than 1% of the population as ego manifestors. And so it's really hard to find information about my authority. And everything that you do find is like, just follow your heart. And I'm like, that's super helpful.
Right.
Right? Like, that's not getting me anywhere. So I've really had to kind of dive in and figure out my unique design and what being a ego manifestor actually means, and coupling that with being a 5-1, which is the heretic. With the 5, I get a lot of projections put upon me, which is really interesting when the authority is to follow my heart and like my willpower, because I often find what other people project on me. And then I'm like, oh, well, I can meet that. Right. And I kind of come a little bit of not a people pleaser in a traditional sense, but just I don't want to fail those projections or that pedestal. And so it's really coming into finding out what is it that I actually want and doing that for me and not for other people. So it's just been a fascinating journey. And yeah, that's kind of the kickoff point of what it means to be an ego manifestor, at least in my lens.
Interesting. Two things I thought. Let's see if I can keep them in my head by the time I spoke it. So like I'm 4/6, so I have like different prominent lines, but like my 4/6 is the opportunist role model. So I often also find myself in this weird spot where people like expect me to know things because I can do a bunch of different things because my life I've been a people pleaser and I thought I need to save everybody from any given scenario at any given point. So I always like gun to your head, like you need to fix every problem. So I learned all the things to be able to just, like save the day, which is, a survival trauma response. But let's talk about that. But also like then they put me as like this person who knows stuff. And then I'm like, well, yeah, but like I'm also not the expert. Like, please, like often also feel that not necessarily as a projection, like you said, but also like I need to step up and like save the day. I'm like, I'm not ready or not equipped, or I can give you pointers of where to go, but I'm not the thing, especially because I'm on the roof. If that does it ring a bell for anybody who's listening, there's like 3 parts to being a line 6, which is like the first part where you just basically try everything and experiment and like, try and error everything. And then you realize after like you're 30, what you kind of like and all the things you don't like, and you just aloof and kind of retract from society and just like touch and go with people, but you usually just observe until you're like, I don't know, 50, and then you come back as this wise person who can like give the learnings to the people in the time you like cocooned. Like that's the idea behind it. So I'm in this cocoon and I can really see in my 20s I tried all the things, everything. I was literally living in all kinds of places. I tried all kinds of different jobs. I was traveling and I did a bunch of different business ventures and all of that. So by the time I was 30, I was like, you know what, I'm done with most of it. I don't care. But now I'm like, what do I actually want to focus on? And people come to me like, you used to do this thing. I'm like, yeah, I don't care anymore. So like, it's this weird thing in between where I want to share a lot of things I've learned, but I still need to like dwell on it a bit more to feel equipped to give people that, because it's like half finished. And I always want to make sure I catch all of the different scenarios so people cannot spin it into something that I didn't say, which obviously
what's interesting about that is totally a manifestor thing. One is like waiting for the urge, right? Like just because you did it before or because you have the knowledge doesn't mean that creative urge is coming through. But then second is that I call it perception, right? So like trying to manage other people's perception so that they don't take your words and turn them is such a manifestor wound.
Yes.
It really is. But then also like I've had experiences where a couple of years ago, actually, I posted in this group and it had about 20,000 people in it at the time. Now it's got about 30,000. But I had posted a comment, a post, and in it, it said 11 words. And it was, what would you think if you saw a female, it was more concise than this in 11 words, but pretty much, what would you think if you saw a female business owner driving a Lamborghini? And that's all that I put. And then I put a picture of an orange Lamborghini. And the amount of crazy dichotomy between some people were like, oh my gosh, I'd want to know what they do. I'd ask them, how they got so successful, to I had people, now keep in mind, I just said, what would you think? And a picture, didn't say anything else, literally 11 words and a picture of a car. And I had people being like, I think you're a vain crook. And I can't believe that you would post this. And what does it matter if you're a business owner? And I mean, and just all of these things. And it was like, it was crazy. So crazy. Like the amount of space between like the positive and the negative. But the negative, it was like, that for me was such a huge eye opener because I'm like, it was 11 words to a topic that I wasn't attached to.
A
And
hypothetical, even. Like, you could
a
have posted it from a
hypothetical.
hut in the desert. Like, it doesn't have to be you in this thing. Nobody
Yeah.
knows.
And it was like, it just turned into this huge thing. 800 comments later. I mean, it was just so insane. And that for me was really my first, like, it doesn't matter what you do. Like, it
Yes.
literally doesn't matter what you do. People are going to perceive it and have an interpretation of it how they want. And as a manifester, that comes from like our throat chakra. It is more important to be able to share what is true to us without trying to manage the perceptions, because you can't manage them anyways. And I mean, I had a similar experience 3 months ago because I have my own podcast. And in that podcast, I, first time ever, it was a solo show for years, 500 plus episodes. And I had my
Wow.
best friend interview me as we came back and relaunched. And so my best friend interviewed me and we shared the story about how we came to like the business name and all those kind of things. And in it, she said the F word. And I was like, no worries. This is the first time in 500 plus episodes that any F word has been said. I'll mark it as explicit. It's the only time it's said one time. Like, that's fine. I noticed a 50% drop off in my listenership 10 seconds after she said that word. And I was like, that's fascinating. And so I created a post and I posted in the same group. That's this massive group, which is really just I posted there so that I can get the good training on like not caring what people think.
Oh, that's
because
smart, because I still
it's,
do, and I don't like that.
and it's crazy because I said, you need to show up authentically. And as people, we're craving the authenticity. We want people to be authentic. But then if they do something we don't like swear one time, suddenly we're off the rails and we can't have it. And it really was not a complaint by any means, but it was really a call to action of like, really evaluate how you appreciate other people showing up authentically and show up authentically yourself. And that was like the core message of the whole thing. And 600 comments later, I was getting called, and keep in mind, I do swear, but I was not the one that swore in this episode. I had so many people. 400 of 600 total comments were along the lines of, you're so unprofessional. How dare you tell me not to swear? You will never be successful. You are uneducated. Just all of these things because I swore in a podcast episode. But I didn't swear. My co-host did in the one time I've had another person on the show. And it was fascinating because I was like, you guys, you didn't listen to the episode to know what was happening. You didn't read the post thoroughly to understand what I was actually saying. You just took it and ran with it and got mad that I, as a manifester, initiated you and triggered you.
Right.
And decided you needed to come and tell me how I needed to show up and that I was never going to be successful and all this other stuff. And it was just such a good experiment. And every time I post in that group now, it really is like, okay, what are they going to interpret from me today? Because you have no idea. I did one a week ago where I shared about my car. And I shared about like branding and positioning and turned it into that. And I had 4 comments on that post saying, well, if you just cared about other people in your business and weren't so worried about the perception of others. And I was like, that whole post was about branding and positioning, had nothing to do with being what you like. It had nothing to do with what they said. And it would be like these patronizing comments of, well, if you just change this, you'll be successful. And I'm like, this whole thing wasn't about being successful, but that's how they're interpreting it. And so as a manifester, coming back full circle here, I cannot control how other people are going to perceive me. And that is like the manifestor role, is we're here to initiate, and how they take that initiation is 100% on them. But it's just, it's been a really fascinating experiment for me to be like, yeah, there's nothing I can do about who this is going to resonate with and how they're going to take it. But in that same vein, I have an equal amount of people who will message me privately. And I kind of wish they do it publicly, because I'm like,
I know
it'd be great to have some backing here. But they message me privately and they're like, I can't believe people are saying this to you. Like, they didn't read the post. They don't understand it. I loved it. I thought it was great. I listened to the podcast episode. I'm a subscriber for life now. And I'm like, that's the people that we're speaking to.
Right.
That's the people who get it. That's the people we're initiating for good. And the other people we're initiating for good, but they're taking it how they want to. And I can't control anything after that fact. But it's so hard as a manifestor, because our whole lives, it's like we said one thing and suddenly the masses have turned on us. And you're like, what happened? I was normal. I was doing my thing. I was being how I am. I have not changed. And out of nowhere, it's like cold water just got dumped on you of the public opinion. And you're like, where did this come from? And it's because the initiations are always happening, and we can't control those initiations amongst other people.
Exactly. And that was one part where I completely, like, my entire childhood, like, basically lived against my design because of this backlash. Even as a little kid, like, I remembered, like, I would inspire all the kids to do like different games and new things, and like try this thing, and then the adults would always be like, you can't do this, you should be more in line. Like, literally, when I would be drawing flowers, I would get shamed for like drawing more than flowers because they didn't tell me this thing. And then other people started copying me, so it was my fault. I was like not listening to the instructions, and like there were no instructions not to draw these. You know, what do you want? And or like I still remember like one of the most traumatic events was just like me in primary school. We got a new teacher, and we loved the older teacher who just left, and she was always doing games with us and like crafting and drawing and stuff to decorate the room, because we were like 7. That's what you do. And this new teacher was more like the typical Germanic, like you just like stand in line and you just be quiet and like listen to authority kind of. I didn't get that vibe because I also have ADHD. I can't sometimes read people. And so we all, like, all the kids got together and we were like, you know, we miss drawing and crafting. And I was just like, let's tell the teacher. And everybody was like, yay, you do that. And I was like, okay. And so I couldn't wait because I have ADHD. So I figured out her, like, that was in the 90s. I figured out her phone number and I called her at like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And next thing I knew, I was like, my mom was in front of me. The entire carpet around me was wet and I couldn't barely see because it was already dark. So I had been crying. She had been like verbally hounding me for being so, I don't know what she thought. I was like terrible person for calling her. How dare I as a student, and how dare I make suggestions, and like how dare I question her authority. Like that was her thing. And I was just sitting there crying, like blacked out. And then the next morning she opened a trial in front of my class. She was like every kind of kid who got out of line, according to her, she put and publicly shamed in front of the class. And so she put me there and like was just like accusing me of all of the things. And like, you know, she asked the panel, which were like all of the mute kids. And I was like, but it was a class decision. And then everybody just turned away from me. They were like, no, what was it? You know, like nobody dared to stand up to her or like back me up. And I was like, great, thank you, everybody. And so she was just like humiliating me and made everybody like stare at me silently for like 20 minutes or something. Like it was the most horrible thing for just suggesting we do like a painting. Like I still don't understand what the crime was. And like even my parents, I know it was extreme. And like she made my dad stand there and look at it as well. Like I wish he would have, like he tried to reason with her. And she was like, no, how dare you bring your dad in? Now it's going to be even worse. I was like, I'm like 7. Like, what do you expect me like to be okay with this? And so like from that moment, I was terribly scared of any kind of teacher because I was like, they're going to like turn on me. I was her favorite student. Even after that, she would constantly grab me and tell me how amazing and creative I was. And I was like, what the heck? Like, what's the hypocrisy? I was always afraid to show that from that point because I was like, they're going to use this against me.
Yeah.
right? And so that is crazy.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's interesting too, because I do believe that as manifestors, we are designed to go first.
Yep.
And that oftentimes is a blessing and a curse, right? Because we're designed to go first, but in that people don't follow. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too, because I've had a really interesting take on leadership. So as a 5-1, naturally I am always thrown into leadership positions. And obviously I didn't know that before I found out about human design. It was just always like, and Taylor's the leader. And I had a situation where I had a massive team and it felt like the entire team turned on me for no reason,
Mm-hmm.
and it devastated me. So I had a lot of leadership wounds and a lot of leadership trauma. And through human design, even I've been able to realize and understand that with my profile lines and our type, right? I'm a leader. Uh, and then B, I can't control those perceptions. And so the people who want to be led are going to want to be led, and the people who don't. And it's not up to me to like take and lead the charge for those who don't. And that's been like the weirdest kind of split between being a leader and naturally having it happen, and stepping into leading because I think somebody wants me to and they
Mm-hmm.
actually don't. And it's a big difference. And your
Yeah.
story reminded me of that, because it is like this, yeah, you go do that, and your neck is in the noose, and they have the opportunity to be like, well, she wasn't our leader, right? And it's like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. It's really about leading from yourself and letting other people follow, versus leading for the sake of, oh, you guys want me to do this? I'll go ahead and I'll do it, because
Right.
that's when the turn happens. But I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
had one situation where it was this I was at this event, and we had a frame, and the frame had all these strings all across it, and then a great big hole in the middle of the strings that you had to lift people through. So the goal was is that we're at this event, and there's about 30 of us. Actually, no, I take that back. There's about 60 of us, and we have 30 minutes to get every person through the frame, through the hole in all the strings in the frame. And if they touch the strings or the frame, they're out. So the goal is to
Oh.
get as many people through as possible, work as a team, do all these things. So the first one, I'm like, I'm okay, like I'm good, whatever. And then they start, and it was an out of body leadership experience. Like the next thing I know, I'm on a chair directing people where to go, and like all of these things. And we made it through, and we only lost 11 people out of 60 in a
Mm,
30-minute time frame. We
nice.
actually finished it in 25 minutes. So it was like really cool. But the whole time I am like, after it happened, okay, so we're finished, I am sick to my stomach, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I jumped in and people don't want to be led by me, like all that trauma coming up. And it was
Yeah.
like, I don't even know what to do. So I really had to kind of process like, no, it was good for me to step into that, even if I was doing it unknowingly. And people listened, and we actually succeeded. And that was the end goal. And so if somebody was upset that like I took charge, they had every chance to take charge as well, and they didn't. And so
Mm-hmm.
instead of taking that on as my own personal, like I'm a bad person because I took charge, because I'm
Yeah.
a leader and I'm a manifester, instead it was like, I'm a good person. I got us through the thing. So the next conference, a year later, same setup. And I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. Like, I'm not going to step in and be a leader. I've done this before. They don't need me. I'm fine. I'm good. I don't need to do this. So I'm like, I will not. I refuse. I will just be a follower. I will simply be a follower. And the clock starts. And this is probably one of the coolest experiences of my life as someone with leadership trauma, where I had people literally looking around and yelling my name. Taylor,
Oh.
Taylor, where's Taylor? We need Taylor. Where's Taylor? And it was an audience of both men and women, both times. And I had a gentleman find me in the crowd, gently grab my arm and guide me to the center, and then push me gently into the middle of everyone and says, what are you doing? The whole time he's talking to me, what are you doing? Why are you back here? We need you. Tell us what to do. And literally pushed me into the center of telling everybody what to do.
I love
And
it.
I was like, no, 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 somebody else can take charge. And I had another person look me dead in the eye and be like, we need you to tell us what to do. Tell us. And I was like, okay. So then I
Nice.
got into it and I directed everybody. And I mean, it got to the point where I had like these 4 guys, and I'm 5'7". And so I'm not small, but I'm not tall. And I had these 4 guys who are all above 6 feet tall. They all come up to me, stand right in front of me as I've been directing people, right? Stand right in front of me and say, where do you need us? And I was like, you two here, go do this. And they literally went, saluted and said, yep, you got it, General. And then left and did the work. And I was like, what world is this? Like, this is so insane. And so afterward, like the takeaway for me was like, I'd had all this leadership trauma and this idea that no one wants me to lead them and all these things. And it was like, no, when you're in the zone and you're with the right people, they're asking to be led. They are requesting me. They are looking for me. And I think that that's an interesting concept as a manifestors, because so often we feel isolated and alone. And we're meant to lead people because that's our design. But we are isolated and alone, and we have been betrayed by people. And so it's so interesting because as a manifestor, looking at it in the lens of the other human design types, like we are meant to initiate, we are meant to lead. And it's a mantle that is often thrown upon us that with our trauma, we look at as a bad thing. But ultimately, without us, the rest of the human design world has nothing to respond to, has no invitations to connect with, has no reflections to happen. And so it really comes down to us to stepping into our power and our authority, but also not being led and driven by what those other people may or may not perceive of us, or how we step into leadership for them. It's stepping into leadership for us, and that naturally initiates them to what they need.
It's true, because ultimately it is for the collective, but it's very personal. And especially if you're ego driven, it's really just like, what do you want? Do you specifically want? And that's selfish in a lot of different ways. And a lot of that is also negatively connotated, but we also need to look at that because, what else are you? If not yourself, when you should be putting yourself first to then, the oxygen mask example, you can't help other people if you're already dying. Like you need to look after yourself first, and then you can actually equip yourself, not pour from an empty cup, that kind of stuff. But also you need to honor yourself. And that's where the authenticity comes in, where you're like, okay, this feels true to me. I do me. And the way it affects other people is none of my business. I cannot kind of monitor or gauge or conduct people into how they react to what I do. I can only focus on where I want to be going towards, like all the people who positively resonate to me and tell me I should lead, instead of the people who don't want me to lead. Then I don't lead them. Then you don't follow me. It's okay, right? So like I don't have to split myself or bend over backwards to kind of be super inclusive where I'm watering myself down. Because for the longest time because I also have an undefined G center. So I always said I'm a chameleon. Like in different countries, I'm a different person. Like depending on who I'm talking to, I'm a different person, which is also kind of masking with the ADHD. That makes sense. But for me, it's sometimes really liberating to just try on different things. Like my pitch changes, my voice changes. Like I try new things. I like, it's fun to me if I just let it be. But then in the same time, in teams, I can be any kind of role. I always felt like in the past, I used to feel like I needed to fill in the gap that was missing. But now I know I can just refuse that, or I can step up to it. Like if nobody's leading properly, then I will be like, can I just say something right here? Can we just please do this way? Or I'll be like, stepping back and just observing, and then just, whatever feels better to me. But in the past, I've always felt like I needed to role model the best way, but didn't kind of feel like I should insert myself because I don't want to be bossy or pushy or tell people what to do when I see them struggling. I want to help, but it has often been also twisted into other, like, how people see that, like you said, the projections, like, who are you to tell me what to do and tell me how to do it better? If I want to do it this way, I'm just like, yeah, you can do it, but I just wanted to offer this. But if you don't want it, okay, cool. you know
Yeah.
so yeah, so like there's a lot of wounding that comes with that, but also like when you realize you have the power and it's about you, and it should be for everybody, like where you feel driven to, where your body just screams no, you should really listen to it. And that's why I love human design, because you realize how we are all so very different, and then we can
Absolutely.
just accept them as they are, not be about trying to change people and to fit them into your prescribed role of how you want them to be in your life, like we do with any kind of relationships often. Like it's on movies and TVs, like you need to change your partner until they're perfect. And I'm like, no, you just take them as they are. If they don't fit, then you just don't, click. Then it's just not, it's just sad maybe, because you kind of had all of the boxes except one, but that one maybe was not, is so important that you just don't make them into something else. Don't do that because you don't want that to be done to you. And yeah, so that's what I love about, I guess, being a manifestor, because there's this weird sense of conviction. Like I've always had it my entire life, and people always comment on that. Like even if I'm being put in a corner, even at my most people pleasingest, like even at the peak
Hmm.
of my people pleasing out, if people told me specific things that I should be doing that were against my values or against something, like my body would be physically revolting and be like, I cannot do this. I'm like, why? It's just a simple task. I'm like, I can't, I won't, I don't do this. And then I was being difficult, whatever. But yeah, just having this kind of innate sense of fight, I think, because I always thought I had like an anger issue, which I never let anybody see, because I was always fuming inside all the time. And I thought, like, I have problems, like maybe I should, but I couldn't talk about it because like a girl doesn't have anger issues, she's just being difficult. And so like I never like, I did snap at people getting irritated, but I never like exploded. I never did that. I did it all against me and hurt myself in my mental health. And so, just realizing that we have that, then it's actually a good fuel. Because sometimes when you push me too much or tell me I can't do the thing, I'm like, I will be defiant, and that is my fuel. And so
Hmm.
many things I made happen was just out of pure defiance, and just like, you tell me I can't do it, watch me.
Right. Right. Well, and it's interesting too. I think you hit on a point with manifestor women and anger. So in my experience, I actually started my personal development journey 10 years ago now, being the angriest person I've ever met. Like, and my husband had a phrase, hell hath no fury like Taylor, mildly inconvenienced. Like, I would just rage at just the stupidest stuff. And I just, anger was my template. The smallest things would just set me off. And my husband had known me in high school, and he had started to say things like, where did you go? You used to be so happy. And I was like raging all the time. And imagine being married to that, right? You're walking on eggshells because you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what little thing is going to tip her off that she loses her mind over. And that was it. And so I decided I didn't want to be this angry person anymore. This is pre-human design and understanding what anger actually could mean for me. But I was like, I don't want to be this angry person anymore. And so I did a ton of personal development work, built in place happiness habits, looked at my beliefs, all of these things, and ended up on a spectrum where I was happy 90% of the time. And anger was very few and far between. Looking at it with a and that, I mean, that started my business and my entrepreneurial journey and all of these things as well. But looking at it back at it with a manifestor lens, right? Knowing now I'm a manifestor, it's fascinating because the personal development work helped me get into alignment. So I naturally am doing things, and I believe still in happiness habits and all of that, but I'm doing things that are aligned for me, that are congruent to me. And so my anger is also less because it's not habitual anymore, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also I'm in alignment. So I don't have these little things being like, you're out of alignment. So now if I get angry, knowing that I'm a manifester as well, I'm like, something is not right here. And it's fascinating because I see it a lot with control from other people,
Yeah.
where people try to they love me. They love me, they love me, they love me until they're like, well, wait a minute. No, she's getting too big, she's getting whatever, right? We got to control this. And so then it's
Mm-hmm.
like I had full transparency, full control, full responsibility. I'm making things happen, I'm crushing it. And then all of a sudden it's like, put a lid on it. You just got to go over here in the corner and you're going to run this now. And it was like, well, wait, why? And I've now discovered as a manifester that would make me so mad. And I'd be
Yeah.
like, what is going on? Because I'm like, here's
Yeah.
this person who's totally nice. And it's just like, here, go do this instead. But they're doing it from a space of control and it feels out of
Yes.
alignment. And here I am starting to get just super ragey about it. And I'm not taking it out on them, but internally I'm freaking out and just like, what the hell? And then I realized with my manifestor lens, I'm like, oh, that's them trying to control me. I don't do well with that. And my anger is my indicator that this is no longer an aligned situation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've walked away, luckily, pleasantly, from an opportunity where I am still an owner in a company. And now I'm still an owner. I have a percentage of ownership. I'm on the board of directors, but I was actually on the C-suite working in the company. And then the main person, she and I were running it all together. And all of nowhere, it was like, nope, you can't be seen as someone who's running the company. Okay, why? Well, it's my company and I need to do this. And I was like, okay, someone somewhere you got it in your head that like I'm out for your company or that we can't be seen running this together. Like, I don't know, but it had nothing to do with her. It has everything to do with the energetic exchange of something in me initiated something in her, and she's taking this route, and it's allowing me to see through my anger. I'm no longer aligned to this, and I need
Mm-hmm.
to do things in my own way and step away from the situation as pleasantly as possible, not letting my anger get control of me, but using my anger as that, like, oh, bing, bing. Okay, why are we so
Yeah.
angry and frustrated and irritated about this person? Ah, here's what the situation actually looks like. Instead of I'm angry and there's nothing really wrong and what's wrong with me and internalizing it and all those things. Now I just look at my anger as, oh, yeah, I am angry and it just means that I'm not aligned to this. But
Yeah.
being a woman and a manifester, anger is definitely not something that we're really allowed to express. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, even to this day, if I get angry, my husband is like, "You are scary."
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, don't get in the way of the freaking inferno that is now my anger that I've let come out." But the
Mm-hmm.
truth of it is that as women, as manifestors, I think when we can see the indication of the anger, it allows us to move through it faster without compromising our reputation, which for me as a 5-1, reputation is very, very heavily in my radar. Without that, like, how do I manage my reputation, but manage my reputation for me and how I want to be seen versus the reputation
Mm-hmm.
of the perception of others, which that in its own right as a manifester is
It's hard.
such a challenge.
Yes. Yeah, I'm always hyper aware of that. Like, am I being perceived way too much? Where I have to like check in with myself. Like, am I letting them like box me and then hold me down? Am I being true to my self-expression? Because oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes I'm just polarizing and I just want to be like pleasant to everybody. And again, I don't know how it will end. So some simple comments can be suddenly like polarizing, like we discussed before, but it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy with the anger. Like now that I notice it, like you said, I can see it as a warning signal where I need to course correct and like, oh yeah, this doesn't work anymore. I've been pushing it. Or like with your examples at work, I've had it a lot where people are like, oh, you have so much potential. And then they gave me free reign because I didn't know what to do with it, because I would always finish all of the tasks way too fast. And they were like, oh, I need to keep them busy. Like at work, at school, like all the time. If I was into something, I would have like lightning speed. I mean, lightning speed's more the distance, isn't it? But anyway, I would be super fast. And and then they would be like, stop. You need to like only do this thing now because you're so good at it. And now I think this is the most useful for me. And then they would put me in this thing. Or like, what about all of the other shiny things? So like, we see that you can do this and now you do this. And then I would be so mad. I would hate it. I wouldn't be able to perform well. And that would give me negative feedback. It would be like, why you're being like, I can notice it. I'm like, what do you mean you're noticing it? Because I'm trying my hardest not to show that I'm being really upset. And I was also really bad at communicating, informing people at all. I would always just shut up and then get like all kinds of weird throat infections mysteriously. And then I would just quit, and people would be like, wait, where did that come from? And I would be like, yeah, because nobody helped me, nobody was there for me. And I would be like, people were like, wow. Right. They're like, I didn't know. I was like, what do you mean you didn't know? Because you didn't even ask me. And then I would be like mad. I wouldn't like, it would be more like watered down snide remarks, or like very, but like inside my head I would be like victim, like blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
And again, with the informing, if I had told people like, look, I don't get this, I don't, or I need this kind of support, or I need this help, or like you can't just keep putting this on my plate. If I had been more informing, it would have prevented things. But I always didn't want to be inconveniencing others because they saw I can do it, I've done it before, and now suddenly I don't want to do it sounded like contrary to me. So like I never felt I was able to voice it out loud, because a lot of people can read other people, and I can really read people in some way really easily, which scares them a lot. Um, but they can't ever do it to me. And now knowing I'm a manifestor makes sense of the, you know, the dense aura where people like really, even if they're super close to me and I'm sitting here being so visibly upset, and people tell me my face is like an open book, like I cannot do a poker face to save my life. They can see all of the emotions and they still don't understand what is going on. And I was like, what do you mean you don't understand? I'm like, obviously upset, but I'm also sad. I'm also confused. And they're like, I don't know what you want from me. I'm like, a hug. You know, like, how is this
Yeah.
hard? To me, it's obvious. And to them, they're like, we just leave her alone because she's so intense right now. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to leave me alone. I actually want you to be here. And so, like, knowing that makes me realize so much of where I'm finding it so hard to communicate that, because again, it makes me vulnerable to like them interpreting that in any kind of way, which can also further hurt me. They're like, oh, you know, don't be emotional, don't be too sensitive, which my ADHD has always heard about anything. And so now knowing what are the safe people where I can be like myself, and they know it's getting intense, so they can be like, you know what, I notice you're like hyping up, you're like getting into the tornado mode, let's just, you know, what's going on? Versus people who are just instantly like tall poppy syndrome, you like cut it out, and then they put you in a timeout, and you're like, this isn't it for me, like you can't keep doing this to me. You know, like to be checking in with yourself and then listening to that anger where it's like, is this your place or do you need to move on? So like, yeah, that's also helped me be more, I don't know, in my anger for good, for like good purposes, where I can listen to it and honor it and then not be angry at the world anymore, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned something that I find myself slipping into as well, which is this like victim mentality, where it is like
Mm-hmm.
it's not their fault that they can't see us, but it still hurts. And it is like, why
Yes.
can't you see me? And why, when you do see me, why is it this from this place of control? Or why is it from this place of disdain? Or why, you know, and so, but then I have to look at it and go, but for every side of that coin, there is the side of the people who do see me and that do resonate with me and that do get it and understand and are like, you're amazing. I want to have more of you in my life. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to fall into that victim space. And
Yep.
actually, my first 6 months with human design, I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
Could not stand it. Somebody would tell me, oh, you're a manifestor. I'd be like, don't talk to me about this. Like, I don't want any part of it. And a lot of it had to do with that the couple of first things that I read about being a manifestor were, oh yeah, you were the kings and queens of old, and think of French Revolution. And I was like, I do not want to get beheaded, and I don't want to be in this space. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm destined and I'm built this way on purpose. Like, I don't want to do that. And I would look at it for the victim side of it. And
Yes.
the messaging and the verbiage and the nomenclature had a victim mentality to it. And
Yep.
so it was after those first 6 months where I found other language around it that actually made me feel more empowered as a manifester, and looking at it being like, look, I can't control other people, and they I can choose to not let them control me. And it's really about that showing up and looking at that other side of the coin and being like, no, there are people. And if there aren't people, for any manifestors listening, right? If there aren't people yet, keyword is yet.
Yeah.
And the more that we try to, I'm going to say, douse the fire that is being a manifestor, right? We are the spark. We are the initiation. There is a fire there that others respond to, right? Generators and manifesting generators respond to the fire. They come and they sit around the campfire, but the campfire was built by us, right? And they can put more wood and things on it and keep it going. The projectors, they are invited to come and join us around the fire, and the reflectors as well. And so it's just really like, but the fire's not there. And so as a manifestor, if we don't have that community of people who love us and I say support, but like love us and support us and care and see the value that we can bring into the world.
Yep.
If you don't have that yet, realize that by dousing your fire, that doesn't happen. You have to embrace the fire. You have to embrace what the anger can mean. You have to embrace the originality, the dense aura, all of those things, so that you can get that community. Because the more that we try to douse and manipulate ourselves to fit in, the more we stand out in a way that is unsupportive to us and our energy, which we're also the only type that has our own energy. Like we initiate our own way. So like we have to be in our own energy, because otherwise we're not manifestors.
Right. And it's also so much more soul warming to keep with that metaphor when you realize people like you as you are in your fully messiness, like in your happiest, in your angriest, like in just the way you see the world, and in the in between of the stages where you're like nothing makes sense but you're acting on it and you're just trusting the process, or you have this random urge to like suddenly move countries like tomorrow, and then you're just on a plane, people are like, what the heck's she doing? And then you just like randomly like stomp around the world. That's what I did. Like I was super angry. I was like, everybody F you, I'm just gonna like move to Australia, I'm just gonna hike all of these mountains, like because it's like nobody had like the heating on and it was cold. It was like I need to say warm, so I like hiked up the mountains angrily, and I was on the mountains and I was like running into these people and they're like, so you look tense, do you want to talk? And I was like, okay. And I would just like unload to like random strangers and I would be like, dear, like let it out. And I was like, you don't like push me down the mountain, like I'm okay talking to you like about all of my anger. And they're like, yeah, you obviously need it. And they would be like, here's my email, like follow up, like let me know if you're doing better, like if you need, I was like, excuse me, like I don't know this person. And like I suddenly was attracting amazing people who like held space and were like affirming different parts of myself that I formerly had to tone down.
Yeah.
They were like, no, be your bubbly self. Be like all of this. Like you were like, oh, like the Tasmanian devil and like Speedy Gonzalez and like all of these things I like put on me was like, so I'm very intense. Like, yeah, yes, you are. But it's amazing to watch this. Like, I love it. And I would be like, is this a prank? I would be like, is this true? Like, are you like, what is going on? And the more and more I did that, the more it was just so amazing. Like the energy I got, the people I like attracted, and the projects I just made out of nowhere, or like I was in the flow. It literally just aligned for me. I was just like collecting coins like in a video game, like jump, jump, jump. Like it was just all like in line, on track. And I was like, what is going on? Like this is wild. This feels magical. And I would have not known, I could have not planned any of that. It really was just working with my spleen specifically, because I'm in the moment person. I cannot for the life of me strategize. It blows my brain out. And I need to do in the spur moment decisions, which seem so wildly erratic. It seems so weirdly impulsive, but that's how I make the best decisions. Where I'm like, I'm done with working here. I need to climb this mountain. And then like magically I meet this person who needed to hear my story. And then that would change your life. And I was like, what the heck did just happen? I would get random invites to random events that I would have not seen if I didn't just ask this random person for directions, and all of this is the power of the manifestor when you just let us be in our weird ways, because I don't even know what's going on most of the time. It's like somebody's steering me and I'm just like blindly following.
Right. Well, and I think the thing with that too is you owned the gritty parts, right? You
Oh yeah.
owned, I can't do this anymore. I'm mad. I'm just going to go hike up these mountains. I'm going to move to this place. And
Yeah.
when you owned that anger, when you owned that spontaneity, when you owned who you were, everything started falling into place versus trying to fit into the box that we think we need to be as manifestors as a part of society. And so I think that that's incredible and such a good reminder for all of us manifestors that we've got to follow our fire to light the way
Yeah.
for others and to have things line up for us.
Yeah, exactly. That was like my big, even before I knew about human design, that's what I did. And where I was like, damn, this is wild, but it works for me.
Yep.
And obviously there were all of these people along my way who were like, especially when you travel, they're like, oh, where have you come from? Where have you been? Like, you have to do these top 10 things in these cities, whatever. And I would do this for a while and then I would be like, no. I would start checking in with myself every day and I would be like, so what do I want to do today? If I just wanted to like for the first week I was in Bangkok, for instance, I was just so excited, but I didn't want to leave the bed. And I didn't. And I was like, that's fine. And I did it. And people were like, are you still here? Like, they would come in and go. And I'm like, are you still? Like, are you like you paid so much money to come over here to this part of the world and you just can't get out of bed? I was like, yeah. I just can't. And then the other times I would just do insane amount of things, sightseeing. Like I would be like on rickshaws, I would buses, I would be tramping, I would be hiking, like just like 10 different things in 10 like in a day and stuff like that. It would be insane. And I would rest and then I would like push and like I would just listen to that flow and be okay with it. And then when people started telling me, oh, these are the best beaches and this is the best temple, I'd be like, no, I'm templed out. Like, no. They're like, but you're like, it will be amazing. I'm like, I check in with myself. No, I really don't care. And then also, I don't know, if inspired other people to be like, I don't have to do anything that travel gurus tell me. Right. And then that became my mission because I was still focusing mostly on like travel blogging and telling people what to do and what to see, but from a different perspective. I wanted to shake things up because I was like, yeah, people keep telling you all of these 10 things, and then all of the blogs have the same thing. I'm like, that's the most boring thing. And especially if you go there, most of it is like a tourist trap or it's very boring. And then there's so many things that locals prefer. And how would you know if you don't talk to them? So I would just talk to random locals and we're like, so where do you go? And they're like, I don't know. But yeah, so like it's beautiful how that can start conversations and make people self-reflect and all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so beautiful as a manifestor to see, like, as a manifestor to manifestor, it's so beautiful to see you in your authority and in your power and in your profile lines and all these things. And it's so great to be able to see the difference between like you and I. Yes, we're manifestors, but we have completely different lines. We have completely different authorities. Yet as a standard for manifestors, it's following that guidance that is yours, and everything else falls into place in such a beautiful and powerful and impactful initiating kind of way, which is incredible.
Love that. It's like the perfect summary for the episode. Yeah. Is there something else you want to leave the people with, and where can they find you?
Yeah. So as far as leaving with something, I think the biggest thing for me as a manifestor has just been, like I've mentioned, embracing the parts that are me and really leaning in and looking at what makes sense for me. That's if I just do that, everything, like you mentioned, everything starts to fall into place and become aligned. So my suggestion would be that's just try that, right? Try to just lean in on what do I like? What do I want to do? What is my spleen saying, or my emotional authority, or in my case, the ego? It's that like, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want this to look like? And then I tend to have the willpower to make it happen. And so I think as manifestors, that's such a good takeaway for all of us. And then as far as where you can find me, I am a business coach. So my website is getgoodatbusiness.com. And I have loved as a business coach being a manifestor and being able to work with the other types and help them find and follow their way with single sentences that I say, and they're like, that changed everything for me. And I'm like, I'm so glad, because that's just me as a manifester. And so I get to really play in my manifestor-ness and my space as a business coach. And I love being able to help other people do the same and get good at business for themselves. So you can find me at getgoodatbusiness.com, and most of my social handles are Get Good at Business as well. So if anybody wants to follow me, chat, or even check out, I mentioned I have my own podcast. It's called Get Good at Business as well.
Nice. Oh, and the links are all down below in the captions anyway, so you can click on them there. Oh, it was so nice talking to you. This was just so, I could do this for hours more,
I
but
agree.
thank you so much for having you. Maybe we should do it just, another time or hop on your podcast. That'd be great.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much. I wish you a lovely day, and all of the audience as well.
Thank you. We'll chat soon.
Yep. Bye. Did it. You have to leave?
I do. So in 4 minutes I have a phone call, because I'd set aside an hour for this, and then I was like,
fine.
I do feel like you and I could talk for forever. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I have a hard stop. I'm so sorry.
No, tell me. No, you need to tell me, because like usually I say an hour, but sometimes it can be even 2 hours, like depending on the flow.
Well, I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I love being able to connect with you. And I mean, we knew this was going to be a rock star episode anyways, because when we talked before, we were already like in the zone.
Right.
So I just really appreciate it. And let me know if you need anything else from me, if you need links or
I need the links, like maybe a short bio, like a sentence, and then your picture so I can use it in the thumbnail.
Okay. Will you shoot me a Facebook message asking for those, and I'll just hurry and shoot them over? Awesome.
All right.
And then
awesome.
let me know when the episode's live, and I'll promote the crap out of it.
All right. Awesome.
Thanks so much. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
That was a beautiful episode. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I would like to hear what type of human design you are. If you don't know yet, no problem. You just find it out online. You just need your birthday, your time preferably, or you check at different points of the day, and your birth town. And I think you know that. So type that in, get there's so many different websites offering that for free. Get it to spit that out to you, and then let me know in the comments. And if you want to connect, to get into the initiator manifestor energy and to see if you vibe, then hit me up on the social media links. Again, the links for Taylor and I are down below in the show notes, so you can easily click on them and hit us up on the different social media platforms, because we're, on a lot of different places. So until next episode, I wish you a wonderful week and talk to you soon. Bye.